Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like the video. Photon subscribers. Today we are talking about how to focus. So one of the things you need to know about your camera is your camera allows you to adjust the magnification through the viewfinder. And that adjustment often, or at least on all Canon cameras, is found on the top right of your viewfinder. The viewfinder allows you some small adjustments like 0.15 or 0.25, maybe as much as 0.5 magnification, or I guess the opposite of magnification would be demagnification, but the cameras only allow you to adjust it so much. So that just changes because of individuals' different varying eye abilities. So it's not meant to adjust a lot for what corrective lenses would do, but it's still something that needs to be set so that when you adjust the focus of your camera with the focus ring on your lens, it's not over adjusting or under adjusting the focus. If you have autofocus, that's very good. I have found that some subjects I shoot, I need to let it autofocus, but I may want to focus on a different part of that object, or even shooting portraits, I may want to focus a little tighter on someone's eye. So I'll not change the zoom, but I will focus just a little bit past the very point of the eye so that the eye appears to be a little bit more in focus, because it's actually focusing just past one part that the camera is autofocusing on and gives a greater or fuller clarity. So be sure to set the adjustment of the viewfinder. That way when you manually focus with your focus ring, you've got a greater clarity and command of what you actually see through the viewfinder and what your photo will show in clarity and focus in the end product. If you are shooting directly to your computer from your camera, then that gives you some availability of selecting focus or selecting the photo that has the best focus of what you're shooting, whether it's product or portraiture. It will allow you that nearly moment evaluation directly after the image is taken to see if the focus is where you want it to be. If the focus isn't where you want it to be, then you know you can adjust it. A lot of product shooting that I did with autofocus, but that was because I wanted to be able to have the camera focus quickly and image very quickly. The aspect of shooting that way is very beneficial to have autofocus. However, if you're doing hundreds or thousands of things a day and you need to have that very quick focus and actuation of the shutter very quickly, one right after the other, especially if you're doing very two-dimensional objects that don't need to show a lot of its depth or focus after a certain focal plane, then you may want to set to a manual focus and just keep putting one object in right after the other. But that would be setting one focus and using that one focus for every actuation. So that's kind of some tips on product photography. Portrait photography, you want to be able to, well, let me back up. Product photography, unless the company you're shooting for tells you otherwise, product photography, you want to see the most in focus of that product. So if you have a two-dimensional item, whether it's a vase or a statue or whatever it is, you want to see in every shot the most amount of surface area of that object in focus. So that's going to mean that you need a wider aperture. So you're going to need to adjust your shutter speed, your amount of light being added in your ISO or ISO sensitivity. Most of that because you want to keep your ISO low and you want to keep your shutter speed fast with a wide open aperture. The wide open aperture would not allow as much in focus. So then really what you want to allow as much of that product in focus as possible is to have a very narrow aperture so that less light coming in causes less chromatic and viewing aberration, but we can get into technicals of that later, is important, so that the more narrow your aperture in your lens, the less light distribution you have, which gives greater clarity for everything that is seen through your camera lens. And that would be why you need to add light to your product shot, so that your product is lit brightly enough so that your narrowed aperture, your low ISO, and your very fast shutter speed are not causing the surrounding area and your object to be too dark. So that's product photography in a nutshell. But going on to portraiture, like we were talking about, you want to have the eyes of your subject lit very well, not just the eyes, but you want them lit well enough that your camera latches onto the eye and focuses very closely in on the eye, so that the rest of the portrait of your client is either in focus or has just enough of that out of focus that it draws the eye to the focused area of your portrait. And the eyes are going to always be one of the focuses of portrait photography. There may be other aspects that you need to include in the focus, but your eyes will always, the eyes of your client will always be the focus. Within landscape, the important thing there, with some of the things that we haven't gotten into with landscape portraiture or photography, is a little bit of math involved, and I don't want to scare you with that, but it is an equation, and it's called the infinity focus formula. But there's some technicals that we can actually make that video in and of itself. So you can go search that. We'll be creating a video on that and how to do that here, with especially the lens that you have. It's important because it does change according to the lens that you use, and a lot of the lenses that landscape photographers use are a wider angle, and so that creates a little bit more need for the adjustment of your aperture so that you have more in focus, the focal length that you have of your lens, and how you set the focus there so that you get everything in focus. It's really interesting, but it requires a unique love of photography to go out and do landscape all the time. The last thing I have here, which doesn't by any means establish the breadth or the variety of photography, but this very much is the top 4 or so styles of shooting that we see the most. Portraiture, that covers the gamut. Okay, portraiture, you always want to see the eyes in focus, even in infant shots. One of the most what's the word I'm looking for? Mesmerizing photographs of an infant shoot is the infant has their eyes open. The infant is awake and actually cooperating for the photo shoot. But even still, you can imagine the focus of an infant shoot is to see the face, to see the hands or the feet of the child. And so you're going to know what those focuses are, but generally with an image of the whole infant, then you're going to want to see as much in focus as possible. So it's going to lend more towards a product shot. Some of the background you may want in focus, some of the background you actually may want out of focus, but it's still all leading to the basics of photography, as we've already talked about, creating the focus so that it is part of the invisible leading line, drawing your viewer's attention to that specific part of your photograph. Wildlife photography, obviously the part of wildlife that you are imaging, whether that's a deer or a bird or a longhorn bovine creature in a field, you're going to want to capture the life of that creature. So the eyes are going to need to be in focus. Larger creatures may be harder to get an entire focus on. So that's one of the things I wanted to mention, is you want to get the thing that captures the viewer's imagination, and you as the creator of this art piece, get in focus what captures your imagination. Maybe it's the width of the horns of the longhorn, or whatever, but you want to make sure that the eyes are in focus. If it's a smaller creature like a bird, then you're going to want to get as much in focus as you can from the eye of the creature to the wingtip. Hummingbirds are hard unless you have a very fast shutter speed. If you are imaging a smaller bird, but not so small as a hummingbird, say a sparrow, then that's not quite so hard, but you do need to keep in your mind that you need to have as slow a shutter speed and as narrow an aperture as possible so that you can get the motion of the bird stopped, or some motion blur if you want, but yet the full focus breadth also with your narrowed aperture, so that you're able to get that blend back and forth of mostly stopped motion or completely stopped motion, and clarity focus of the eye of the creature to the wingtip or the furthest part of that creature. So that kind of concludes our how-to focus. I didn't go over a lot of the basics of the ring, focus ring on your lens. I know you're an intelligent audience, and so you know that focusing one way is going to focus closer to you, focusing the opposite way is going to focus further away. But that's just the basic of changing your focus, is you rotate that ring around your lens and it will adjust either closer or further away. If you look at the readout on top of your lens, most lenses have that measured in meters and feet, and that'll tell you generally at what focal zoom you have. If you have a zoom lens, in the zoom it will adjust where the focus ring is to be able to focus at 3 foot or 6 foot and so on. So all of that together shows you the greater flexibility of what your lens is capable of and where you should be focusing at that current time. If your camera is on a tripod, you can kind of measure out, get a feel for where that is. If you're holding it in hand, then you're going to know generally how far away from your hand and the camera your subject or object will need to be. Thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe, like the video if it has added value to your photography, and comment down below what you would like to see next. And we will be adding more and more to these videos as we continue to, as already suggested this week, where we're adding in weekly challenges of imaging objects or numbers or other things. So thank you so much for watching, and we appreciate your viewing our videos here. Y'all have a blessed day.